Welcome to the White Sox REKAP Podcast. I am Ryan McGuffey, coming to you from Wright Field as the White Sox wrap up the first half of the 2026 season. And as we record this, they are still in first place in the American League Central in what should be a very exciting second half. And it all starts with the Major League Baseball draft on Saturday. I had the opportunity to sit down with White Sox Director of Player Development Paul Janish here at the park, and we discussed a litany of things, including the first overall pick in Saturday's draft, but the success of the White Sox development since he took over in November of 2023. How does he relinquish the reins once they get to the big league club? What defines success in 2026? A little bit of rapid fire with guys in the system that maybe you as a fan have written off. And is he prepared to let go of some of the White Sox top prospects if Chris Getz needs to make a big move at the trade deadline? It's an all-encompassing interview with Paul Janish, Director of White Sox Player Development, on this edition of the White Sox REKAP Podcast, and it starts right now. All right, with White Sox Director of Player Development Paul Janish here at a beautiful day as we record this leading into the All-Star break. Paul, happy to have you on the podcast here. And it feels like a long time ago you were hired, but you really weren't. It was November of 2023. So much has changed since you've taken this role with the White Sox. Does it feel like a long time ago? There's a ton of growing pains in there, but there's some fun to be had in 2026.
Yeah, it's gone by really quick. I think, time flies when you're having fun, and I point to our group in general, whether we're talking about, the front office and, the guys that gave me the opportunity, or we're talking about our player development group. It's a group of people that are, like-minded. You get along, and you work harder if you like the people you work with. I kind of believe that, and we've had some good fortune. Obviously, we've had the opportunity to get some of our players, especially this year with the run that the Major League team's on, but some of our younger players are getting to the big leagues and having some relative success, which I think is good for everybody involved. But it has gone by fast, but I mean, we're enjoying it, and with the Major League team doing what they're doing right now, I think it's safe to say that we're trending in the right direction.
I want to talk about your role and how it fluctuates from running the entire farm system to the Major League level, and your input still in that. But if I told anyone, I'm just going to ask you this question, but if I said in February, hey, Paul, we're going to be sitting here leading into the All-Star break and the White Sox at the big league level are in first place in the AL Central, what would you think?
I get a little flack for being a think like you be lucky guy. Were we expecting this at this point in the season? I'm not sure, but to say that I'm surprised, I'd probably be lying a little bit. I think you have to be optimistic, and especially in my role, but in general in player development, you gotta believe that the players can get better, and that goes for the Major League level too. Will talks about it a lot. Still developing them at the big league level, and we talk a lot about objective information, which we've made obviously an effort to be really good at, but I think there's some subjective components that we see in our Major League clubhouse every night that we've had the opportunity to see on the player development side the last couple of years that I think are real, and right now we're benefiting from it.
13 Major League players have made their Major League debut, as you know, before the All-Star break. I think the 1944 Reds are the only other team to do that. And a lot of times when that happens, there's some lumps and bumps to be taken along the way. But pick the guy that has come up this year, and there's been production. Whether it's Sam Antonacci or Junior Perez. I mean, whoever it might be, you're getting production from every one of these players. And that's rare. You know that, but being a big leaguer yourself. Why has the success come with the guys who have made their Major League debut in 2026?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint. And, there's different ways of acquisition, right? You look at like a Brian Hudson, who's a waiver claim, who's had a really important role in the bullpen. Jacob Gonzalez, Sam Antonacci, Braden Montgomery. A lot of the guys you mentioned. Drew Romo was a waiver claim in the offseason. It is hard to pinpoint. I talk about the Major League level, and it's a hard transition to make. Having the benefit of being a former player, I always say it's not the push-play league. It's hard to come here. You got to adjust to a bunch of variables, most of which honestly are outside the lines. To see the success that the players have had, in particular the guys that we drafted and came up through the organization, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a ton of credit to our player development group and our staff and our managers and our coordinators and just the people that touch the players every single day. It's one of our kind of mission statements. We talk about doing winning things, right? And at the minor league level, that doesn't necessarily mean the scoreboard every single night, right? It means the way you go about your business. It means the way you show up. One of our, Getz, he talks a lot about trust and the ability to trust, whether it's staff or players, but again, the ability to just show up every night. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be 3 for 3 every night or throw 6 innings. It means that we know you're going to give us what you got. And we've really fostered that at the minor league level in PD, and it is really cool to see it coming to fruition at the major league level.
Not everybody in your seat, in Chris's seat, in Will's seat played in the big leagues. How important and unique is that in your specific role, and with your GM and it being Chris Getz and yourself and Will Venable having a long productive career? It's unique that the front office top down, including the manager of the big league team, has that type of knowledge, and that's the knowledge that you understand when a guy's in an 0 for 20, or he might be, like you mentioned, something about off the field. There might be something distracting him off the field where you can say from personal experience, hey man, look, I've been there before. How important is that?
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I'd highlight Josh Barfield as well, and it does give you a perspective that is unique. I also feel comfortable saying I don't think you had to have played in the big leagues necessarily to be able to help players get better, but it does help with perspective. It does help, I think, I'll even use the term patience, right?
Yeah.
I think you understand all the things all the variables that come into play when a player is trying to, first of all, get to the big leagues, number one. I kind of believe it's harder to stay there than it is to get there. So, and just helping them navigate that path. And I think the ability to, and I feel comfortable, I think, Getzy and Josh and Will, we would all say the same thing. Not being a really good big league player gives you even a different perspective. So, the ability to kind of reference that from our own path and our own story, so to speak, I think really helps us with the ability to, communicate with players.
When Chris came in and took the role, when you came in, the cupboard was pretty bare, as you know. And there was a lot of talk about depth or maybe lack thereof. Where would you assess the organizational health now? I mean, the system has 5 top 50s as we sit here right now, and some of those are playing in the big leagues right now every day. But knowing that you have 1-1, knowing that there's guys outside the top 100, which is given so much attention, that are coming, where would you assess today as we sit here near the All-Star break of 2026, the organizational health at?
Yeah, and I think health is the best word. If you're talking about a healthy organization, all of the arms have to be operating well. That from an international acquisition standpoint, obviously trade standpoint, the amateur draft, which we're preparing for this weekend, and the way I would describe it is I think at this point we all have a pretty good idea of kind of who we want to be and who we're trying to be and who our major league team is right now, playing hard. Again, I referenced the winning things, but the organization as a whole, I think, is in a really good spot. We've had some of our better prospects. They're in the big leagues. That's what we're here to do, is to get them there. And so, we try to say we're gonna the players that are the Caleb Bonhamers of the world, right? The top 100 prospects. Obviously, a lot of attention goes to those guys, but I would highlight maybe some lesser known guys within the organization that I think are going to have the opportunity to help the major league team, and I really think that's a tribute to like our process, but it also is there's clues. If you look at organizations that have had success over the years, kind of replenishing their major league roster with guys that maybe weren't first round picks, is something that we aspire to.
I mean, you could see it every day with Sam Antonacci. You see it with, I mentioned Junior, Jacob Gonzalez, a first-round pick, but not heralded as a top 100. So, you're seeing that here every day at the big league level. What about the pride in the role? I mentioned this in the open, like how your role fluctuates, or does it? Can you explain the role of the director of player development once your guys get to the major leagues and have success? I mean, the pride level you have to have. Outside of being a dad, I would think it's some like proud dad-like, but how does that change for you when guys get to the major league level versus, okay, now those guys are here, we got to worry about the guys below?
Yeah, it is a little bit likened to a parent. It really is. And like I have to highlight our staff and the job that our player development group does as a whole. I always talk about, a teammate mentality. Like we're all on the same team and, pulling in the same direction. And I believe that the players feel that. And, you care about them. You love them. You also lean on them. Like there's some hard love too. Like we don't always tell them what they want to hear. We tell them the truth. And then relative to helping them transition to the major league level, I think, again, you go back to our process and the communication that we have, whether through the front office, myself and our major league staff, our coordinators and the major league staff. I point to our AAA staff, who I believe is doing a great job, and Chad Pender and Will Venable and their communication with regards to, hey, how do we put these guys in the best position to succeed, right? We know who they are. Like, let's not put them in positions that are counterproductive if we can help it, understanding, like, the major league level is a production league. You got to go up there and play good, and if you don't, in most cases, you don't get to stay.
You have the number 1 pick on Saturday. I'm not asking you to divulge any secrets about who you're going to take, and I give the organization credit because you can look at mock drafts as much as you want, and there are different names pretty much for every mock draft, but the process itself, 1-1, as you know, is very unique. How has that process been, and what specifically are the White Sox looking for other than top overall talent? There's got, like, what you talked about, pulling from the same rope and being a team, but what is that one thing on Saturday when the White Sox do make the pick that's going to stand out for one player over another?
Yeah, I really think, first of all, we're super fortunate to have the first pick, and especially in a year when there's multiple options that the industry feels like are worthy of being the first pick. So, I really just think you highlight the process again, and you're just doing the best you can to pick the player that you feel like has the best opportunity to, obviously, to be a very good major league player, but it also fits with what we're doing here, and plays the game the way we want to play it. And the talent at that point in the draft is unique. It doesn't matter who you take. Like the projection is going to be very good. So we're very fortunate to be in the situation. There's obviously a lot of preparation that goes into it. I give our amateur scouting group a ton of credit with the amount of work and background that goes into it. And a lot is going to be made out of the first pick. We all know that, and it is a big deal. And we are looking forward to it. But the draft's 20 rounds, and we're looking to figure out a way to get value at pretty much every single one of those picks.
So you're in a spot this year where instead of selling, you're likely more buyers than you are sellers. So this is going to be the first time with you in this role that you're going to have that opportunity. How does, in your seat, knowing this farm system up and down and knowing what it's going to take to whether or not you guys are going to go super aggressive, protect the assets, a combo of both, what is your role in the communication with Chris in terms of, hey, this guy X, this guy Y, this guy Z?
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's doing a really good job over the course of time, right? This is not something that we're making a decision on, in the next month in between now and the trade deadline. It's something, look, we get to know our players. We philosophically believe it's our job to know our players really well. And, but at the end of the day, if you get into a position where you are trying to acquire a major league asset, at times you got to part with players that you feel like are going to be good players, and it's just part of the process. So ultimately we're just trying to do the best job of understanding who we have, what we think they can be, how they fit with us, and then weighing that against the potential asset that you're going to add in a trade piece at that time of year.
How do you value seasons, because they're sacred, as you know? There's teams that you've been on that had World Series aspirations and never took off, and there's teams like this team that no one is really projected to do anything so soon. It's a threading the needle, like, careful situation you have to be in, knowing there's a labor stoppage, et cetera. How do you just value seasons in a whole when you look at being in first place and the volatility of seasons, year to year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a tough one to answer. What I would say is, you do look at them independently, right? This year obviously is going very well. There's a ton of season left, and so I think you can't lose sight of, the macro view of the health of the organization. And you want to do the best you can to, again, balance the specialness of what we hopefully are seeing in this season and some of the things that have happened already and the players that are, in some cases overperforming maybe what people thought that they would do. But, I feel comfortable telling you, like, they're doing what we thought they were going to do. So, like, you want to maintain the health of the organization, like I referenced. So, making those decisions are tough, and you have to respect each individual season. And to your point, you don't get the opportunity every single year. I've had the benefit of being in and around the game for long enough to understand, like, seasons don't always add up the way you thought they were going to, whether it's due to injury or an assortment of other variables. So, again, they're hard decisions to make. You do your best to accrue as much of the information as you have, and then make the assessments on what you think help the team, obviously in the short term, but also in the long term.
Baseball seasons are funny because fans and media only see what's on the field or on television every day. And when a guy's injured or when there's a guy struggling, they're almost written off, but not for you guys. There's a lot of names that I don't want to say have been written off, certainly not in the organization, that are probably going to help this team in the second half. So I'm going to ask you to give me 4 names that aren't currently on the active roster, not named Munetaka Murakami,
okay,
that are going to make an impact before the end of the year, and why?
Yeah, so I'll start with a couple, right? And if you're asking this year, right? So you're talking about some of the guys at the top of the organization.
Sure.
Assuming health, you feel like a Tanner McDougal, a Hagen Smith can help in some way. Obviously, those guys are getting healthy right now, and so we'll see what the future holds. We've already had Riku Nishida up here, right? And so, like, I know it's a little different, but of an angle, but like he adds value in different ways. He already has this year. Sure. Edgar Caro's not in the big leagues right now, right? Like, I think, the first half of the season hasn't gone the way he would have liked. I'm a believer in the player, and I do believe he's going to, get back up on the horse, so to speak, and add value to our Major League team this year.
Just a couple more with Paul Janish here, and we appreciate your time. But when you look at a guy, you mentioned Edgar Caro, I think it's a perfect transition into a guy like Miguel Vargas. This organization took heat 2 years ago for that trade, and here he is as an all-star. People forget or maybe don't realize he was a top 30 prospect. We talk about prospect rankings. Edgar Caro was a top 50 prospect. So, and he's 22 years old. How, as an organization, someone who's helped the development, and I know that Vargas has been at the big league level the entire time, but as an organization, when you see a player kind of hit rock bottom after a trade and see him make an all-star, like, what is that feeling like?
Yeah, the game's hard, right? Like, that's just all there is to it. And I say this a lot about, some of our players in the minor leagues who don't have the season that they're planning to have because of their prospect status. I actually value that. Like, I think it's so valuable for guys to struggle. And when I say struggle, I'm talking about performance, not just getting hurt, right? Like, to me, that's different. But, Edgar was fortunate in the sense that he pretty much made it to the major leagues before he ever struggled. And I just think this is a speed bump in his path. And again, I know the player well. I know the person well. I believe in him. I think he's going to bounce back. And he's always played well. He's always been young for the level that he's been at, including the major leagues. So yeah, we're working with him to help, from a mentally and physically standpoint, to kind of get back into the right frame of mind to be able to add value here.
All right, I want to play a little rapid fire with you. So short answers are great, and I'm sure that the shorter the better for you. I'm going to name 8 guys, okay? And you're going to give me like a where are they now, whether it's a status update or however you want to interpret this. We're going to rapid fire. How about Baroa?
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? Rolando Baroa.
So he's still in Arizona trying to get healthy. Had a little blip on the radar, but he's the kind of arm that is super unique to a bullpen, right? So like when he's right, and hopefully he can get healthy, probably closer, the second half of the season, but towards the end of the season. But he's the kind of guy that he could in effect act as a leveraged bullpen trade piece.
Drew Thorpe. Speaking of guys who've been written off, Drew Thorpe.
Drew's had, some unfortunate. He had the appendix, that was completely unforeseen. He's same thing. He's the kind of guy that can. Obviously, we have aspirations of him being a part of the rotation, right? So, the timeline is not certain right now. But I again believe in the player to be able to get back healthy, number one, first and foremost, and then get to the major league level.
This guy had a huge spring. He's only played 10 games in Charlotte. William Bergoya.
Getting healthy, should be back towards the end of July in Charlotte. Think a lot of the player. It's one of the best baseball players in the organization, and hopefully you interpret what I mean when I say that. Just does a lot of different things to help you win a game.
Iriarte, I know, was just a pitcher of the month in the system. How about him?
Probably is taken. He started the year in AA, which was a little bit of a shot to him, and he has done everything he can do to kind of get back to what we feel like he can be, and he's been lights out for the last month. So he's on the radar for sure.
Billy Carlson.
Yeah. Oh, man. Never met a camera he doesn't like. He's getting healthy, too. Unfortunate, sliding the home plate. He plays the game hard. Ultra competitor, ultra teammate. He's a really good kid. He's young, and our group is very fortunate to have him, first of all, in our system, but also, like, just being a part of his, development path. And this kid's unique defensively, obviously. I have no problem being on record saying I think the offensive floor is way higher than people think. Love the kid.
George Wolko.
Making adjustments. One of the most competitive guys that we have in the organization. Super tough mentality, plays the game hard, and some of his indiscretions, right, like the swing and miss, and he's just been super open to adjustments. And I'm telling you, when he connects, he hit a ball last night in Nashville, it was just super unique. I mean, it was going up when it went over the center field wall. So it's an impressive skill set, but he knows what he has to do, and he's working.
And then I'm just going to ask you one question about a guy who's here, but we saw maybe quote unquote written off last year, and then just ascended at 19 homers before. It could be Jacob Gonzalez.
Yeah, give Jacob a ton of credit, man. He's made some fairly significant adjustments, and it kind of all came together this year. And so he's been extremely durable over the last couple of years. Also just old school baseball player. Shows up every day, doesn't say a ton. He just posts.
All right, so one of my probably the most fun when I did a sit down with Chris, not this year, last year. I threw this at him, and he was like, hang on, let me think about this. I'm leading you, and I think you may know the answer to this question. But when Chris Getz hit his first big league home run, do you know who's playing shortstop?
Oh, geez. I assume was it me?
It was you.
Oh, come on. I did not realize that.
In Cincinnati.
I'm sure
you were the starting shortstop that day.
So there's two things. He probably wishes he got to play more games in Cincinnati.
I think he mentioned that in the answer. Answer that it felt like the right place to hit his first.
That's a fun fact that I was not aware of. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew that. It's literally like my favorite. It's so baseball that you guys are now running this organization together, and you were on the baseball diamond at the same time for different organizations trying to like live your big league dream. So I think that's really super unique. I'm going to ask you one last question. You can answer it however you'd like. How would at the end of the 2026 season, what is success?
Yeah, so I mean, I would really say, like, going into the season, one of the goals was to like have, take a step forward. What does that mean, right? And like I think it's really come to fruition, and it's equated to win. So like I'm not saying that a certain number of wins or whatever is the goal. It's the product being, starting to look like what you want it to look like. And to your point earlier, has it gotten there a little quicker than maybe we thought? Sure, but I feel comfortable saying we don't know what the future holds in between now and the end of the year relative to health and whatever the case might be. But, paying attention, and I'm not in Chicago all the time, but seeing the fans come out to the park and the environment that can be created here, the Chicago, the Cubs versus White Sox series earlier in the year was just something that I personally have not been exposed to in that fashion up to this point. And so I think that's what success is. I think that, the core of the team, the way the team plays, the way that the fans appreciate the brand of baseball, I think is really what we look at and point to, and understanding, look, we're here to win games, we're here to get to the playoffs and ultimately aspire to win a World Series. But I do think that there's a ton of context right now to point to that the arrow's pointing in the right direction.
Well, we certainly thank you for your time. There's a lot going on, so for you to sit down at this particular time of the year with pre-drafts prep and, Saturdays and Sundays MLB draft, the rest of this season, the health of the system. Congratulations thus far, because the organization has come a long way since you've been in this chair.
No, I'm very thankful to be part of it. And like I said, it's across the organization, it's very much a teammate mentality. We got a bunch of like-minded people that are in it for the right reasons, and I'm just thankful to be a part of it.
I love baseball, man, because you get a nugget like that with Paul Janish, who doesn't even know until I tell him that Chris Getz homered. His first Major League homer was a game that he was starting for the Cincinnati Reds. I love how baseball can connect dots, otherwise unknown, and then all of these years later, these two men are helping lead the White Sox in the current and in the future. A lot of big takeaways in that interview, wide-ranging stuff. Very clearly, the White Sox are focused on the big three at the top of the draft in Rock Chalowski, in Von Lackey, in Grady Emerson. In fact, we did hear from the White Sox scouting director, Mike Shirley, shortly after our interview with Paul Janish, and we'll have some of that for you on our social platforms. But there's a lot of takeaways, including the fact that the White Sox, in a time where they might have to make hard moves to acquire big league talent, to covet special seasons. And you heard Paul Janish talk about understanding how sacred winning teams and winning seasons and what's going on here at the big league level are. And because, look, he had a long career in the big leagues. Chris Getz played in the big leagues. Will Venable played in the big leagues. They understand how seasons can be pop-up seasons and come out of nowhere, and you have a chance. And those guarantees are none going forward. So it'll be interesting to see if the White Sox do make a big trade and who from the system that they'll have to pay in order for it to go. But when you have 1-1 and then pick 41, as the White Sox do on Saturday and throughout the MLB draft, which is 20 rounds, mind you, Saturday and Sunday, you have the luxury of being able to replace something at the top that you might have to trade away to get. So really good stuff with Paul Janish. I appreciated the rapid fire that we did with some of the players that maybe, again, that we in the media, fans alike, have written off as we get closer to the second half and what will be an exciting White Sox pennant race. I said exciting White Sox pennant race in 2026. Something I didn't expect, something Paul Janish didn't expect, but you heard his definition there at the end about success, and I think that's a really good, successful answer, no pun intended, because the White Sox as an organization have to take a 30,000-foot view that sometimes the fans have to look at on a nightly basis. We thank the White Sox for setting us up with Paul Janish. We thank Paul Janish for his time in a week where he is spending a lot of time in meetings, in organizational meetings, whether it be draft or trade alike. We'll have plenty of coverage from the Major League Baseball draft. I will be in Philadelphia covering the White Sox picks, as well as Miguel Vargas and any other players that are named to the All-Star team between now and then. So podcasts to come over the weekend. We appreciate you watching this edition of the podcast or listening, if you're on audio form only, to this edition of the podcast. If you don't subscribe to the recap, what are you doing? 250,000 other people do. Make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell, because every time we drop a new podcast, you get the notification, and boom, here we are for you on YouTube or wherever you listen to audio form podcasts. I'm Ryan McGuffey. We'll see you next time on the White Sox Recap Podcast.